Welcome to today's episode of Between Neens and Deens. My name is Nina, and I'm joined by my best friend, partner, and baby daddy, Dayon.
And together, we're a couple of 20-something-year-olds just trying to navigate this whole first-time parenting thing.
So we're laying it all out there and talking about all the things you wish your parents told you about love, sex, and happiness. So we are currently in the midst of the biggest civil rights movement in history. Like, we're not just talking American history, we're talking about in history.
That's pretty insane.
It's insane. It's all 50 states are rallying behind this movement, protesting about defunding the police, demanding justice, standing up for Black lives. And it's not just in America. There are also many countries that have spoken up, that are protesting. People are in the streets. Like, even here in Canada, the protests are huge. Like, it's not just, like, I feel like in the past, when we've seen protests for Black Lives Matter, especially in Vancouver, they've been quite small. Like, there are people that show out, but like, from what I've seen, it's huge. And we obviously both haven't been to the protests. Like, we've considered it, but
with COVID-19 happening
happening and just having a newborn feels irresponsible. So like, I wish I could be out there, but that's our situation. We've been doing a lot of like educating ourselves at home, having conversations with our community, with our parents, donating, signing petitions, everything that we can do from our home, essentially. And yeah, today we're going to be talking about anti-Blackness within our own communities, kind of the conversations that we've had, the reactions that we've had from social media. And obviously Dayon is Serbian and I am Vietnamese. We both come from communities that benefit from privilege, especially like, I mean, I am not white, obviously, but as an Asian American, Asian Canadian, I guess I've never really said that before, but I definitely benefit from white supremacy. And even though there is racism towards Asian communities, like, it's not to erase that fact or not to say that we don't also have our own struggles that are very different. It's just acknowledging the fact that there is anti-Blackness in our communities and we do benefit from privilege and from being like seen as the model minority. Because
And that's why I feel this is a global issue. It's not just America that needs to stand up, because there's anti-Blackness everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
There's racism everywhere in the world, and like, everybody needs to stand up, regardless of like whether you feel this is not your battle or.
Well, it's a human rights issue.
It is, yeah. It's not a political issue. It's a human rights issue, 100%.
Like, when I was trying to have this conversation with my parents, it really quickly turned into like Democrats versus Republicans, and it's like, it's not about that. Like, I'm not even trying to like, you know, like, have your own beliefs, whatever, like, choose your political party. Like, that's a whole separate conversation that I won't get into, but it's a human rights issue. And like, to have a group of people say that we want you to stop killing us, like, this is our experience, and then for some people to say, okay, but, and then just throw statistics and to try to devalue what people are saying, like, it baffles me, because it's like, how does a group of people say, please stop killing us, and like, that's not translating, you know?
That's the thing. I think the problem is that a lot of people try to make it about themselves, and I think I saw that so when I did a post about Black Lives Matter on my Instagram feed, I actually got some backlash from the Serbian community. They came up to bring statistics, to bring about how like more white people are dying, or
it was so personal.
Yeah,
like,
and that's the thing.
It's white fragility.
They took so much offense to the protest, which is not like the intention of it at all. And like, to make it about yourself is literally the white privilege that you have. And like, I guess the thing with the Serbian community, I understand that like, we've went through our struggles. Like, we had a war, we have been discriminated against coming to, you know, Canada or America, because like, you have an accent, you're an immigrant at the end of the day, and no one is trying to discredit like the type of things that we had to go through. But that's not what the argument is about right now.
That's the thing about privilege. Like, it just goes over your head, because it's like, oh, like, I've experienced hardship. Our people have experienced hardship. What about us? You know, like, that happens in the Asian community all the time. Like, we're seen as foreigners. We never fully belong. We're never fully American. Like, I get that, you know, like, and that's a struggle in and of itself. And that's a conversation that's, you know, for another time. Like, that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about Black people being killed in the streets. Like, it's not to say that you don't experience those things. And I think it's really hard for people to see that, because they feel like it's one thing or the other. It's like, what about me? What about me? But it's like, it's not about you right now, you know? Like, and it's just really hard for people to get that.
And regardless, that doesn't make it okay. Like, I mean, the things that happen to white people, like, we understand, like, we're not trying to discredit the Holocaust. You know, we're not trying to discredit all these things. But in this present day and age, with your white passing, like with the pigment of your skin, allows you that freedom to not walk in fear. Do you know what I mean? Like knowing, I mean, sure, you might have that once in a while, like where someone might call you a Jew or like a dirty Serb or whatever it may be, like which other kind of slander that they can throw at you. But like, this argument is not about us. But the thing is, like, I've seen it so many times. Like, all lives do matter, but not until Black Lives Matter first. Like, that's literally what it is.
Well, like, you can't say all lives matter when you refuse to admit that Black Lives Matter. Like, it doesn't make sense.
And that's, like, literally, it's, like, the first step. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because then all those little details of, like, what we go through, sure, that might fix after that. But, like, the main issue right now is, like, people are dying, like, at an insane rate. Like, Black people are dying at an insane rate.
And it's like, not just, I think, like, what it really... for like these people that are arguing all lives matter, blah blah blah, like what it really comes down to is a lack of knowledge and a lack of education. Like when I was having these really difficult conversations within my community, like I realized that things that I were doing, like my argument tactics that were not working very well, like I feel like because I studied sociology, because I come from, I feel like a very informed place. Obviously there's a lot that I need to learn and understand, but like I spent, years like studying this and like making it what I specialized in and what I was really passionate about. And for me, like, it feels like everybody should have the same kind of knowledge that I had. And I think I was really in that bubble of being like in higher education and like being in like a sociology program where everyone feels the same way, where everyone kind of understands and has compassion and like understands systemic racism and like the systems in place that support white supremacy. But like not everyone operates from that place. And I think I was just very naive to realize that I was living in a bubble. And so for me, like when I was arguing, I was getting so upset, like so upset, because I was just like, how do you not realize? And like for me, I have to like take it like 10 steps backwards. And I know it's not like, that's the thing that people say, like it's not your job to educate. But to be fair, it's not Black people's job to educate. I feel like as a person of color that is not Black, like it is my place to.
It's literally everyone's job.
Yeah, like it's your job to educate yourself. But for me, like especially like with my parents, like I feel like it's my responsibility to be like, hey, like this is what's going on. Like let me educate you. And I found myself operating from a place of like, I know more than you, and you're not engaging with like the right kind of content, with the right kind of knowledge, like watching all this fake news and stuff like that. And like I realized that I was just kind of attacking, which
forces people to become defensive.
Yeah, and like I see that.
Really
I see that, and like it's hard because it's like I feel like if I'm talking to another young person, that's like like of our generation, then I do put the onus on you to like read up and like be educated, because you have access to the internet. Like we all know how to like use Google and like you have all this information being thrown at you. But for older generations, I get that they view news in a different way, like they engage with social media in a different way, and like I see that it's different. So for me, like I see my responsibility to educate differently with like my parents and an older generation. And so yeah, it was very frustrating for me, because I was like, you literally paid for my education for 4 years.
You don't want me to use it.
Like I was like, you sent me to like this incredibly progressive, like really great high school, and paid for my university for me to get a bachelor's in this specific thing that you're telling me that you know more about. Like it was just blasphemous to me. And like I still get upset about it, because I'm like, how do you support my education and support me going out into this world and like doing the work, but also like not wanting to listen to me and thinking that because you watch a couple newsreels that you are fully informed. So when I was really able to kind of feel like I was getting to them a little bit more, it was really just making it personal. And it's not even really that I felt like I made a big break, but it was more like I could kind of sense that, especially with talking with my mom, where I could sense that once I made it personal, then there was more of a willingness to almost shut down the conversation, like not engage with me, because it was too painful, and
made her uncomfortable.
Yeah, it made her uncomfortable. Like, and like you need like
supposed to push through that.
Yeah, so like I think for me, like obviously it's not, one conversation isn't enough, and it was incredibly emotionally draining for me to have these conversations, but it's important. And like I don't know if I'll ever really be able to like convey what it is that I feel, and like if I'll ever really get them to see things the same way that I do. But I think that even just having them challenge their ideas even a little bit like makes a difference, because the older generations, like, they are voting, their voice matters too. And like it's important to have these conversations with people that don't just agree with you, because like my audience on Instagram seems to be on the same page with me. Like I feel like I'm very grateful to have an audience that is very open to educating themselves and to like accepting this knowledge and to listening to Black people's voices and just being a part of this movement. But at the same time, like, it is a bit of an echo chamber where it's everyone that's engaging with me shares my sentiments. And
you need to have those uncomfortable conversations, you need to have with people that don't understand or don't, because that's the only way like change will happen is once everybody can see that bigger picture and can really understand. Yeah,
but I will say that I've been seeing content and like infographics floating around of people saying that social media is an echo chamber, and 100% like it is, you know, like if I'm shouting the same thing at people that all agree the same thing, is not changing anyone's opinion. But I feel like what makes a difference is sharing information, because like there's a difference between like just reposting something, like reposting that black square, you know, like so people know that you're in solidarity. Like it doesn't really do anything for anybody that sees it, because it's like, okay, now I see that you're performing activism, and are you actually signing petitions? Are you donating? I don't know, but are you sharing information with your followers? Like information that people don't know. I feel like that's what, like, I feel like that's how you can kind of break out of that like echo chamber that isn't very productive, because even if everyone agrees with what you feel, everyone might not operate from that same place of knowledge. And so being able to share information and knowledge, like, that's power.
And that's the thing with the black square. It was good. It was a good intention, but like it needs to come with action, right? You can't just post a black square.
Don't use the hashtag.
Oh yeah, because then that just messes up the whole algorithm, or just messes up the whole hashtag. Because
you click on it and like all you see is
black squares, which really brings you nowhere.
It made it worse, because all you're doing is drowning out the actual voices.
And then it just feels like one of those like chain mail kind of trendy things to do.
Well, it's performative activism. It's just proving to people that you're doing something.
Yeah.
But are you actually?
And that's the thing. Like I understand a lot of things do happen behind the scenes. It's not all like via social media, so like we need to respect that as well. But I do see a lot of people that don't really speak on it at all, like even on their stories, and then just post a black square. And then the worst part is when it's just a black square with absolutely no caption.
No caption, never posted in their story. Like, it's like, what do you, at that point, like, you don't need to post the black square. Like, I get it, okay, you don't like racism. Like, it just, the purpose is to...
And you know what? I feel, sorry to interrupt you, but how I feel about that too is because, I mean, we saw a lot of posts circling about how like silence is murder, and if you're silent, then like you're with the oppressors. And I think maybe there's a lot of people that haven't really taken not trying to call people out, but kind of trying to call people out. But you know what I mean? Like people that maybe haven't taken the time to actually think about it, but they see like, oh, if I post this, then I'm not with the oppressor. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's a trend. It's bandwagoning.
Yeah, but they haven't fully actually like understood why they're doing that or why anything is going on right now. I think another thing that I saw one of my friends post about, be careful when you tell your black friends like, oh my goodness, I'm so shocked by what happened.
Oh yeah. Well, it's not be careful, just don't do it. Like, how can you be shocked?
Exactly. And that's the thing, because black people are not shocked. This has literally been I'm not shocked, and I'm a white person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this has literally been happening for far too long.
Yeah.
For constantly. And the thing is, like, when I received my comments on that post, the man was trying to tell me about statistics. Do you know what I mean? And it's like,
oh man, people are just okay.
And that's disgusting. Look,
I'm gonna sound so fucking annoying, just constantly bringing up my degree. I don't care. But like, you know, as somebody that studies sociology, you read a lot of statistics. You learn that statistics don't mean anything if it doesn't have context. Yeah, it's like you can't just say a percentage or say a number and not realize the context in which it operates. Like, you can't say this many white people were killed when you're not realizing that white people are the majority in America. Like, context matters. Like, you can't just throw around numbers, and people that are throwing around numbers, like, it's just something for you to like hold on to without actually doing the research. Like, that is another thing about like everything that's been happening and like with educating ourselves. Like, I mean, it's great to be on Twitter and, you know, getting your information from there, but like actually doing research, like reading articles, like
about redlining, about the whole systemic racism behind it,
like understanding history,
the whole
like
history.
it's a lot of work that goes into actually understanding what's going on. And going back to like the Black Square thing, like at the same time, like the hashtag going around was amplify melanated voices. And so I don't know if I just understood this wrong, but I assumed that like it was together, where it would be like everyone kind of taking a break from their social media posting, like don't post your selfies, you know, don't talk about this other shit that you're going through, and like let Black people share their experiences, like say whatever it is that they want to say, and like give them this space, give them this like opportunity to voice their stories. And people were taking it as, okay, let me take this opportunity to post my Black Square piece out of social media and take the time for myself as a non-Black person to reflect. Like it was so counterintuitive, because it was like the point is to engage with these people and hear their voices. And then it was people just leaving social media. And all I would see on my feed is just a bunch of Black squares, whereas I felt like it was way more productive when I was seeing information, you know?
Things that would force conversation to happen.
Yeah. And like I feel like people were supposed to, or like the idea was to amplify melanated voices, and like I didn't really see that too much. And like the most blasphemous thing to me was like when I saw, this is something on Twitter, but somebody tweeted that I don't know the exact numbers, but it was like, say like 15 million people had posted a Black square with hashtag Black Lives Matter, and only 11 million people had signed the petition to arrest the officers that were responsible for George Floyd's death. And it's like, that just tells you right there, like it's all performative, it's just for show. Like you need to actually be putting in the work. Like I know we just keep saying that, but it really is like, it's like change is not going to happen if everyone is just shouting the same things and not actually doing anything to back it up. Like you see all these companies like coming out and posting Black Lives Matter because either one, they've been called out for not doing anything or saying anything.
It's just to make the brand look good.
It's bandwagoning, and it's like, oh, like, okay, like if you buy our product, then we'll donate 20% to like, you know, like we don't like.
You're still trying to sell your product.
Yeah, like it's not about that. That was the whole point of Amplify Melanated Voices, was to listen to Black people, not for other people that are not Black to make themselves look good or to push their brand and their products. Like it's not the time for that. Like it's the time to like support Black brands, Black creatives, listen to Black people's experiences. Like it's just like it's so far misses the mark.
So circling back to anti-Blackness that exists everywhere in the world, and I know a lot of people saying like, oh well, I'm in Canada so I'm not involved, but
God, that's just the most blasphemous thing. Like racism doesn't exist here, like anti-Blackness doesn't exist here.
It exists very strongly.
Like Canada likes to think that it's post-racial.
No, the incident of that woman in Central Park when she called the cops on the guy saying that her life was threatened.
Oh yeah,
she's a Canadian.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I think a lot of Canadians feel that, oh, I'm not racist because we use, like, politically correct terms. You know what I mean? But that's still racism, bro. You know what I mean? Like,
well, that's the thing about anti-Blackness is that, I mean, even in us, you know, like, there are things that we learn that we constantly, like, it's not just something that you ever get to a place where you're not doing the work to unlearn it. Like, it's a lifelong journey of, like, constantly checking yourself. Mm-hmm. And, like, I 110% was raised in communities that it was just a lot of, like, microaggressions and little things that were said. And it was very much, especially being an Asian person, that was just kind of like, don't be like them, you know? Like, I grew up in a very poor neighborhood, and it was very diverse. But it was always kind of like, yeah, we're all struggling, but, like, don't be like them. And so it was always, like, a sense of otherness and a sense of, like that we're better. And like that's anti-Blackness within the Asian community. Like we are seen as the model minority because we are compared to Latinos, to Black people, and we're seen as like the best minority or like the one that's praised. And when you buy into that, like you contribute to anti-Blackness, to white supremacy. Like you are operating in that system. And like I think that's another thing that's important to talk about, is like a lot of the conversation is about validating Black voices and all these statistics about Black people killed by the police, blah, blah, blah. But what the conversation should really be about is white supremacy and whiteness. Because, like, it is the same conversation. It's very much of the same coin. But it shifts the focus from being about whether or not Black people are worthy of life, which is, I mean, it just shouldn't even be a conversation. It's more shifting the onus onto white people and non-Black people about acknowledging our anti-Blackness and the ways in which we contribute to this system that continues to oppress Black people. And like I feel like when you make that shift, then I mean, it's hard. I think that's the thing, is that it's hard for a lot of people to acknowledge their privilege and to not acknowledge the ways in which you benefit, because to you might only see your struggles, you know. And I think that that's very much true for like communities like yours or mine, where we've had our fair share of struggles, but like it's not about that.
It's not a struggle competition.
It's not a struggle Olympics. Like it's not about that. Like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm saying the same things over and over again. And like, we've been talking about this like day and this is all we've talked about for the last week. And I don't know how else to say it. Like, it just... Yeah,
if you guys find yourself in a conversation where statistics start being brought up, and like, literally understand what you're talking about. Like, you're talking about human life. You know what I mean? Like, it shouldn't be about like, well, statistically this, statistically that, and like, look at this, it's not a race issue, or I'm not at blame. Like, are you saying because I'm white I'm a racist?
Man,
like, all this shit. Like, it's not about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's about human life. And like, everyone is worthy. Everyone is, you know, should be looked at as worthy to fucking survive. You know what I mean? Worthy to live. And like, have equal rights. And not even just equal rights, but
it's
like...
it's equity. It's like, everyone should have an equal opportunity to elevate, you know, to...
Without discrimination, without being judged. And the thing is, like...
Like, I don't understand how that's so hard for people to believe. Like,
Black people literally getting judged for the color of their skin, which is ridiculous. And like,
about
that's
everything. About education, about like housing, about the healthcare system. It's like, it's not equal access to any of those things, to none of those things.
Yeah.
And it's like, people think that, you know, if we have an equitable society where we do allow Black people access to those resources, like somehow they get a leg up. Like, no, like you're equaling out the playing field. Like, they've been...
I think that's what a lot of people are afraid of. That's white fragility. That's what people are afraid of, where it's like, well, like, what about me? Well, what about this? You know what I mean? Like, it was tough for me too, and I like made it. You know what I mean? So it's like, why can't they just make it? Or like, when you be like, there's some Black people that are like very successful, but like...
It's tokenism. It's like looking at Oprah or Michelle Obama and being like, oh, well, you know, like, or even NBA players, like, oh, like, they made it, so like, all you have to do is work hard and you can be like them. Like, that's tokenism. It's just looking at one or two cases and not realizing or failing to admit that there's a whole system that oppresses everybody, and just because one or two people made it out or like were able to be successful, it doesn't mean that they're not experiencing racism at every fucking level. Like,
that's true too.
Like, that's it. Yeah, like, just because you're Oprah does not mean that you don't have people saying incredibly rude things to you, or like having people judge you, like when you walk into a store, like things like that. Like, that happens all the time. And like, I think what people also kind of fail to realize, but are realizing more now, is that there is a difference between microaggressions, between racism in like your daily actions and like covert racism, and like what people identify in this day and age as overt racism is just like, you know, like the KKK or segregation, but it's systematic. It's in everything. It's literally like Black kids not being able to have the same resources as white kids in wealthy suburbs, you know, because they don't have after school programs, because they don't have access to the same counselors, because they're told by their teachers that you're not worthy, you're never going to be anything.
The schools are underfunded, like, too.
Yeah, that's like their schools are underfunded.
They
like
don't
teachers,
have extra... Yeah.
It's like, it's so widespread. Like, it's literally like, you expect the people that spend, honestly, like, so much time with your children, 5 days a week with your children, to be amazing and nourishing and like, you know, encouraging, but also like, we're not paying teachers enough at all to give a fuck, you know, like, and
that's where defund the police is coming from.
Yeah, like, that's the thing. Like, oh my God, like, when I was trying to argue like the purpose of the protest, I just kept getting like, you know, Democrats versus Republicans, like looting, like riots, like blah blah blah, like what is protest even, like what have they ever achieved? And it's like, okay, well, women didn't have the right to vote until women protested, you know, like, they're like, protests are literally why change happens, and like riots are a part of that. Like, yes, it's fucking unfortunate, but like, property is not important, it's not more important than people's lives. And like, the people that are protesting are literally asking for justice for people that kill other people, to have consequences, and also to divest funding from police into communities. And I don't understand why that is so hard. Like, there are people, white supremacists, people that support this system, that fully just, like, they want resources and access and opportunities for themselves, and everyone else needs to fight for it. Like,
And I think other nations that have like free school don't understand
free, like,
why.
higher education.
Because
and,
that, I mean, like we're the people. You want your people to be the best educated.
Like America keeps touting that it's like, and like as an American,
but that's where systemic racism comes in, is because school is so expensive, and if you've already been redlined in this neighborhood where your family doesn't make money, you don't make money. What else are you going to turn to? You can't really... Education is expensive.
Education is literally how people elevate themselves.
Yeah, so, like, you turn to, obviously, like, you know, you're a product of your environment. So, like, I mean, if all your neighbors are selling crack and that's a way to make money, you're probably going to do that. And you know what I mean? Like, but that's like, the thing. A lot of white people look at, like, well, if they just got a job and, like, stopped selling drugs...
Yeah, but they don't realize that, like, all the kids that are in these schools, like, it's literally, like, there are cops in these schools. Like... When I was arguing with my mom, like, she didn't realize us living in San Francisco, it is a bubble. Like, she's like, oh, like, you can now go to... They changed it, so now you can go to school in any neighborhood. And, like, that's why
San Francisco's expensive. Yeah, because, I mean, it's different from the rest of the states.
Yeah, San Francisco, honestly, was, like, an incredible bubble to grow up in. Yes, there is racism and, like, violence and things that happen there, but it's incredibly progressive, and I was exposed to so many diverse, like, backgrounds, like, socioeconomic backgrounds, and, like... Whatever, I'm not going to just toot my word about San Francisco, but, like, in 99% of America, your neighborhood dictates where you're going to go to school. And a lot of the schools that are underfunded, that are in these poor, mostly Black and Latino neighborhoods, they have cops in all these schools. And I was actually reading through Banksy's comments this morning just because I really like to read comments and just get aggravated by ignorance. But, like...
Man, they were ignorant.
But people were just saying, like, oh, well, like, you know, if we didn't have cops... then, like, more school shootings would happen. And that just is so baffling to me that people, like, you would rather spend money to try to fix an issue than prevent it. Like, if we had more counseling, if we had more resources, if we had social workers.
Look at the mass shootings, too. Most of those are by white kids.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that it's literally, like, it's gotten to the point where schools aren't teachers and kids. Schools are teacher kids and cops. And it's literally a school to prison pipeline. It's all these young kids that are constantly being told, like, oh, you have behavioral issues, and, like, so therefore you're... like, never gonna amount to anything, you're never gonna succeed, so you might as well just quit now. Like, they put them in detention, they put them, you know, like, they suspend them. And it's like, when you do things like that and you don't actually support a kid or provide them with resources to, like, or, like, even, like, the skills to deal with anger, or, like, you don't know what these kids are dealing with at home, and a lot of times it's because of systemic racism that, like, they don't have the same opportunities or resources.
That's the thing, as like with white privilege, that we don't understand. It's just like all those years of being broken down, like your character being broken down.
Yeah, it's pervasive. Like, it's every aspect of life. And people telling you that, like, you know, these things aren't for you, or you can't achieve these. Yeah.
So, like, it's either, yeah, you have that chip on your shoulder, or you end up, you know.
And it's like, people don't realize that kids don't just lash out for no reason. Kids aren't bad. They don't have behavioral issues for no reason. You know, a lot of times it's either because of issues at home, or because they're in a place where they feel stuck, like they have no other options. And, like, if you teach kids, like, these resources, like, there have been studies where, like, people introduce yoga into, like, a lot of these schools, and, like, it actually helps them because it gives them an opportunity to feel safe, to breathe, you know, and to, like, know that somebody else is there, like, to support them. Like, that's the point of counselors and social workers. And, like, my point, what I was getting to was that, like, it's a school to prison pipeline where literally these kids are being told you'll never amount to anything. They're getting into trouble because, like, they don't have resources, they don't have people in their life that care, like, when they're in school. I can't speak to, like, families, but, like, then they start misbehaving, and then all of a sudden you have them in juvie. And once, we all know that once you go into
that system,
once you're in the system, it's really hard to break out of it because there are so little resources available to you. It's so hard to get a job afterwards. Like, I mean, just watch the Netflix documentary 13th. Like, it literally explains everything about
When They See Us as well.
Yeah, When They See Us is another really good resource on Netflix, but it's about how hard it is to break out of that system once you're in prison.
Like, if you look at the prisons, too, it's, like, overcrowded with black people, which is insane. And, like, I've seen so many documentaries already on, like, how a lot of people are wrongfully convicted and all these things like that. But, like, it's literally a form of slavery. Like, they're doing a modern-day form of slavery. They're doing work for nothing, like, and constantly in that system and constantly, like, you know, doing work that benefits the white person's pocket. All of that stuff makes a difference, and that's why, you know, defunding the cops is a thing, is to be able to bring money into those communities that need it the most. And, like, even if you just look at what the riot gear that these police are having now, and, like, the outfits they have, And compare that to like what the healthcare workers were wearing. Literally garbage bags and like not having enough masks and not having all these like things that they need. That's medical things that humans need. You know what I mean? But like, meanwhile, these cops are equipped with all these weapons and all this
literally military
Kevlar and all these things to like protect them, and they have mad immunity. They have all these things, and they're literally out here killing people, which is insane.
It's crazy because like when you do actually see videos of like police responding to these riots, and like that one specific video of those two officers that pushed over that old man, if you haven't seen that, it happened in Buffalo, and it was
quite graphic.
Yeah, it was literally a like 77-year-old man that they pushed over, and he was in critical condition, and like when the old man was on the floor, literally not a single officer, not a single one stopped to even just check if he was okay. And like that's the issue right there, is like it's not just defunding the police, but it's also that mentality. It's that groupthink of like there's just not one person that could break away from the pact and like do what maybe they felt was right, of like, hey, maybe we shouldn't push over this old man that was literally not causing any harm whatsoever to anyone, was not a threat.
There was no accountability.
And there's like, and then there's a video that came out today where the two officers were arrested, where they're being held accountable, but when they were leaving the courtroom, all of their colleagues are just fucking clapping for them. Just clapping. Not clapping because they were charged, but clapping because they stood in solidarity with their cops, with their coworkers. And like, it's that groupthink and that mentality that is terrifying. That it's like there's no accountability for cops that do either murder people or that rape or that harm citizens, the people that they're meant to protect. There's no accountability, and it's also that it's all meant to just protect each other. That you like, there's no individual voices, you know, like there's no one that can stand up.
Another thing to note too, before the cops were even aware that footage was taken of that event, they actually in their statement wrote that the man tripped over and fell.
They literally pushed him.
And they literally pushed him. And that's the thing, is like that there's no accountability within the police force to even call out like, one of them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Where like another cop isn't going to say like, you know what, actually that's incorrect. I saw my colleague push him. You know what I mean? No one is going to do that. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of a gang mentality. And that's the thing.
10,000% a gang mentality.
And that's the thing, right? That's where the problem, that's where the problem is. Like, what was that t-shirt you saw on the Vancouver Police Department website? Literally said, the world's largest
street gang. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The fact that that's the mentality of the people that are meant to protect us, and the fact that, like, they can harm and murder and get away with it. That, like, they don't answer to anybody.
And a lot of people here are thinking, like, oh, yeah, well, like, these riots are insane and this is, like, probably the first time it's happening. But if you look at Los Angeles in 1992 when Rodney King got beat, it was the same thing. Riots were happening in the streets. And the interesting part, too, is that, like, the Bloods and Crips were actually getting along and, like, working together, because the cops had that same mentality. They actually called themselves the Vikings. It was a gang. Like, they literally made a gang where they would just go into these, like, neighborhoods and just, like, bully people and, throw people in jail and convict people for things they didn't do. You know what I mean? Like, just because they just want to close cases. And so it's so easy political. To pin it on, you know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing. It's easy to pin it on these people who live in the hood and, already the way the nation believes that, like, oh yeah, they definitely did it because, there are a few black kids from the hood. And it's pretty insane that's what this world is like. That, it's just, I want to close these cases. I want to meet my...
There's no justice.
There's no justice at all. It doesn't matter about, like, whether, you're catching the right person, whether, justice is made. It's just about... And, I mean, there is no justice. Literally, cops be getting away with murder. And then they be throwing other civilians in jail for shit that, they didn't do, which is insane. So, I mean, what these protests are about is accountability and, like, having that, immunity lifted where, a cop can receive real consequences for the actions that they've done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the same way that, like, civilians have
consequences. Yeah, because, like, they shouldn't have that kind of immunity.
And on that note, we went on a huge true crime binge like over the last like couple of months, and there's so many series on Netflix, and it really is eye-opening. Like before watching these, I would 100% say like, you know, like if you didn't commit a crime, why would you say that you did? You know, and like if a jury finds you guilty, then after they've given all the all the evidence, then you probably are. You know, like I think that we're kind of now seeing that we shouldn't trust like the system and police, but like more than ever before, like I'm realizing how much like you really can't trust like the justice system, because justice is not served most of the time. This is kind of off topic, but really like there's just so much manipulation that happens, and just because you see that somebody has admitted to a crime or like they're being charged for something does not always mean that that was what happened, because there's so much that happens behind the scenes that we don't see, and that like I really didn't realize. But
I want to circle back to what is defined as white fragility. When people feel like, oh, so I'm white, are you calling me a racist? I mean, the movement is called Black Lives Matter. And I think the problem is that a lot of people are not looking at that in the right way. A lot of them look at it as like, oh, wait, well, then what about white lives? Well, what about these lives? You know what I mean? So it's like, but that's not what it's about. The whole movement is to bring awareness that Black lives haven't mattered in America, and it needs to.
That people are literally having conversations about their value as human beings. Yeah. Like that tells you that they're they humans. Don't matter. Like,
and I think, I mean, it's kind of funny that like they have to make kindergarten like comparisons where, you know, someone's house is burning and then they go like, well, all houses matter. We're like, well, your house ain't burning. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and that's the thing that like it has to come down to like making kindergarten like things so that people can understand
how ingrained it is.
Yeah.
That like fundamentally like with white supremacy and whiteness, like Black lives have been so devalued, and it's so desensitizing, you know, like you're so used to it that like you can't even understand that like that is what you are arguing. Like that is what is so blasphemous, but like that people are really, really failing to see.
So Baby Blue has joined us. He's a little bit upset right now with everything that's going on.
But the podcast must go on.
But the podcast must go on, right, Blue?
Do you have anything to say?
Do you have anything to say, buddy?
Yeah, I know.
I feel the same way, buddy. Yo, even Blue signed a petition. Come on, guys. Get your shit together. So now that Blue's here as well, I want to mention this one very interesting comment that I received by somebody was about how they believe diversity has failed and that ethno-nationalism is the way to go. And that's a really interesting topic because people... I mean, he's speaking from a privilege of being able to have a home, being able to go somewhere. Do you know what I mean? So, for instance, again, this is a Serbian person. With that being said, that would be like Nina would have to go back to Vietnam. I would have to go back to Serbia. But where would Blue go? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense and that doesn't work. But also, the other deep-rooted issue here is a lot of the African Americans, when their ancestors came here as black slaves, they were taken from Africa and they don't know which part of Africa. Do you know what I mean? Like... But at the end of the day, none of that works. Like, we're American, we're Canadian. It needs to be just like a melting pot of us all.
When I was taking a Sociology of Canada course, we were talking about the differences between America and Canada. There are a lot of fundamental differences. But when it comes to diversity and the idea of a melting pot, in America, it's a lot more of a simulation. It's more of that idea of we need to all become American, have this American culture, and like speak English, and you know, like you hear that rhetoric a lot. But in Canada, it's less like there is still the pressure to assimilate, but it's not as much. It's more of like everyone kind of keeping to their little enclaves and to their own culture. Like if you think about Richmond and how you can honestly live in Richmond and just speak Mandarin never learn English, and you can very much do that. Like it's kind of that idea of like sticking to your roots, and whether that's a good or bad thing, because like in a lot of ways you're not diversifying, you know, your circle. But it's just very different. It's very different in how America and Canada both view assimilation and that idea of a melting pot. Like, I think people say that Canada is more like a salad, where it doesn't make like a full one thing, you know? Like, it's everyone is still...
Each thing has its own individual flavor. And I think in an ideal world, everyone has their own culture, but everyone is in close proximity to each other and able to, you know, involve themselves in those cultures and in those traditions. You know what I mean?
But at the same time, I do feel like with both models, there are issues because in America, like, it urges you to lose your identity to kind of give that up and claim an American one. But I mean, what makes you you is being, you know, Vietnamese American. So like, you know, like, yeah, like your dual identity. But in Canada, on the flip side, it's more of like keeping to yourself, but then it doesn't allow you to really interact with and really understand people of other communities because you're just keeping to yourself.
But that's what I'm saying. I feel like our generation and younger generations, that's the time to like really, because like for me, like I love learning about every single like culture, like the types of food and just like the history behind it. You know what I mean? And I think like if everyone was more involved in educating themselves about each country and what makes them great and like, you know, have more understanding, then like we could really all get along. You know what I mean? Because I think right now there's just like a lot of fear and a lot of like separating things. Like there's a lot of Americans that, man, I had in Miami where a dude asked me, "Oh, in Canada, do you have Muslims there?" And the thing is about Miami, like it's quite segregated. Like you don't have a lot. It's not a melting pot at all. It's very like divided. And so he asked me that, and I was like, yeah. And he asked me if I walked around in fear. And that's when I realized like how much the news and media really influences people in America. And it's so sad that like...
I wouldn't say just America. I feel like in a lot of modern day countries, it's news is propaganda. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, like you have to realize who's funding it.
Yeah, I mean, which was just like so insane to me because I'm like, yeah, my best friends are Muslim. You know what I mean? It's like... At no point do I walk in fear. At no point do I think they're going to drop a bomb on me. You know what I mean? And that's the thing with this fear-based media is that, like, a lot of times on the news, you'll just hear black people are looting, black people are stealing and, like, and killing people and, like, black-on-black crime and all these things, right? But, like, that shit needs to change. Like, we need to understand that with black people, there's always a negative conversation, whereas with white people, it's more positive. Like, for instance, when, like, a white person commits a crime, like one of those mass shootings, it's usually he was sick or he was like mental illness, you know what I mean? Whereas like when a black person does it, he's like an animal or like a savage or like a thug, yeah, you know what I mean? And it's like, I've been pulled over by the cops a few times, you know what I mean? And when they ask me for my license and registration, without even thinking, my white privilege allows me to just reach into a glove box or reach into my pocket. Or even I've had situations where I got out of the car and be like, "Man, please have a conversation with you, officer," and like be able to try and, you know, negotiate like my situation. And just the videos that I've seen online, like it is not the case for black people. And the thing is, because of our white privilege, we don't even think about that.
People literally get shot within seconds.
It's like this kind of fear that I think police officers have around them.
Well, because black people are framed as criminals. So you immediately assume that when you see a black person, that they're doing something wrong, that they are a criminal, that they're dangerous, that they're probably armed. But like, so they don't, like, police are trained to protect white people.
To trust that, I would reach into my glove box and not pull out a gun.
Well, yeah, because that's the thing is that white people are framed as, like, normal, as good, as, you know, like, model citizens, what have you. Mm-hmm. And black people are framed as criminals. And so, like, when you go into a situation with that mindset, like, that's why cops end up being, like, so trigger happy. Because they literally feel as if they are in danger when no part of the situation poses a danger to them. It's literally just because they go into a situation thinking, this is a black person, therefore I am in danger.
We need to stop talking like that about human beings. Like,
well, that's just like news and media. Like, it really, like, I don't think, like,
but that influences like the older generation.
But that's the thing is that when people don't realize that news is biased, that, like, I think that it's just because you grow up with that idea of like news is supposed to be unbiased. It's just the facts, you know? But like, it's not at all like that. It hasn't been like that for a very, very long time.
I think that's because fear equals views and like people really interacting with it. You know what I mean?
Well, that's
because,
why there's
like,
always a war on drugs, war on terror, war on blah blah blah.
Something,
like,
yeah, always.
Because like if you live in fear, then you have more trust in your government. You'll do whatever your government says. You'll believe whatever your government says. But I feel like, I mean, at least our generation, I think, has more understanding that like those are not the facts.
Yeah.
And the irony with all the protests that have been going on is like there are people that are peacefully protesting police brutality, and then there are police that are brutalizing these protesters. Like, how do they not see the irony in that?
And I mean, also, don't believe everything you see as well. And like a lot of this looting per se as well, like when you look at the videos, a lot of them are just white kids just like that want to fuck shit up.
Yeah, like people taking advantage of like
the fact that there's you know an uproar
unrest,
and that there's an unrest, so they take that as an opportunity to grab what they want. But you know, that's not what it should be about. And I can understand like certain people's fears. Like for instance, like my mom has actually come a long way, which I was quite surprised about, because I mean it wasn't always like that in regards to when you ask her about like Black lives and things like that. But now she's actually, you know, more understanding and is like actually understanding like the white privilege and how it is unfair that all these things are happening. But the other thing too, like being an older person and just watching the news and seeing these riots and like people getting hurt and things like that, her views are that it's not worth it to get involved because of the risk of you being injured or hurt or killed, which I can see, you know, I can understand that, but it still is like our fight. You know what I mean? Because something that we still need to stand up for. It's also like your white
privilege to like break down the system that privileges them. You know, like,
yeah, because I mean, for the most part too, like that's the thing that like literally like what I said, from this being in 92 to like even further back to, you know, the civil rights movement, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, like they've all fought for so long, for so goddamn long, and like, you know, their voices are not being heard. Like even like, you know, Tupac has said it many times as well, like with his music, a lot of people would say it's aggressive. But that is the thing, like it needs to be aggressive at this point,
because gotten aggressive
because they've been asking it for so many years. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like through hip hop music and through like even just saying Black Lives Matter, like white people feel attacked, but they need to, because they haven't been being listened to. You know what I mean? And white people are more in a privileged position where they can actually, you know, speak up on it and be able to like make a change. Because Black people have been doing it for so long, and I'm not saying that there's no change, but it's happening far too slowly. Do you know what I mean? And I think we all need, it's everyone's responsibility to stand up, because at some point, you know, someone higher up in whatever it is that can really make the decisions to make it happen needs to realize and make it happen. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, like it really is on all of us. It's like, it's people that, you know, work in management. It's people that are policymakers. And I think as young people, like, we can see that social media, you know, like, creates a change and, like, people speaking up and things like that. But really, at the end of the day, what will make a huge difference is policy and laws. Like, that's why, like, voting is so important. And the people in these positions of power that we vote into power that can make an actual difference. Like, you know, like, I mean, changing someone's opinion about racism is very important as well, and it's important to do that work, but it's also very important at the same time to be voting, because like
there's strength in numbers, and everyone needs to come together to be able to make change for real.
Yeah, and it's like if you think about like even the Immigration Act of 1965, you know, like that's a policy that had a dramatic effect on immigration in America, and I'm sure on like racial attitudes in America, you know. So it's like all these things need to be working together at the same time to get us to where we want to be. So like, yeah, don't underestimate your voice in voting. Like 100% registered to vote. Your opinion and your voice matters, and I think that's a really good place to end this. This has been a very long-winded conversation about I mean, what started as anti-Blackness in our community and into all these other little topics, but
subdivisions.
But I mean, these conversations are important to have, and again, not just with people that agree with you, especially with people that don't agree with you. So on that note,
uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
I also do want to mention just how incredible these protests really are, and how so far we've already seen a few baby steps. We've seen some changes happen.
Yeah, protests work.
Yeah, and like, I mean, as you know, like just all the things that are going on right now, you can see, you know, there's been like some policy changes and some cops that have been arrested and, you know, facing some actual consequences, which would be great. And yeah, we just got to keep going and just keep, you know,
don't lose
signing
momentum.
petitions where we can. Don't lose momentum. Don't let this just be like a trend and that it's over in a week. You know what I mean? Like, we got to keep, you know, keep this conversation alive and keep, you know, keep things progressing, because, you know, this is, you got to think about the future and like our children, man, you know, and like,
talk to your kids about racism. Obviously, Blue is only 6 weeks old, so he will not understand anything that we have to say to him right now. But it's so, so, so important to talk to your kids about racism. Kids show preference for race at a very young age. So, like, you want to be able to talk to them before they, you know, before someone else gets to them, or before, like, propaganda and, like, media gets to them, you know, because they notice these things. And it's not an easy conversation to have, but there are lots of resources. It's a very easy Google. There are a lot of books out there, that you can read to your children. And when I was in first grade, that's when I first learned about racism, and like that's when I learned about segregation in America. And I was not too young to understand that. I fully comprehended what was happening and that it was wrong. So like, kids are not too young, and they are our future. So it's really important to invest in them. And if you want them to be the ones that are, you know, like fighting this fight in the future, then you have to provide them with the right tools. And yeah, it's really just, it's a PSA that kids are not too young.
So on that note, there's obviously so many more things that we can talk about, and I would just implore you all to just, you know, educate yourself, learn as much as you can, and do what you can, and really help where you can.
And the conversation doesn't end here.
Doesn't
like,
end.
Activism doesn't end here.
And honestly, and I know a lot of people, you know, are afraid of COVID-19. Literally, there is so much that you can do from home. You know what I mean? Like, you don't even have to leave your computer screen. Like, literally, you don't even have to,
educating
you can do it all
yourself,
on your phone.
Honestly,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, educating yourself, I think, is like probably the most important place to start.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that there is a knowledge deficit.
And if you're white, acknowledge your privilege.
Yeah, that's huge too. But anyways, yes, we're gonna end this here. You can follow us at Neens Deens on IG. I am at Your Girl Neens.
I am Dayon's Day Off.
And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.